I work on a natural gas drilling rig in northern Alberta, Canada, and this is a little photo essay of me getting to work. I start with my 1997 Chevy Cavalier. Oh yeah! I dust off the snow, and this is a picture of my apartment complex where I live in Calgary. I drive from Calgary up to Edmonton, Alberta. It takes about 3 hours on the highway. I do this in order to avoid bad weather, so I can make sure I get to work the next morning on time. My motivation for doing this is that there's been a lot of controversy in regards to the Gateway and Keystone pipelines, and a lot of environmentalists seem to be throwing around a bunch of alarmist rhetoric that seems out of touch with the reality of the world, and especially the country in which we live. I think a lot of environmentalists are urban, and I don't think they have a good idea of the sense of vastness that you really get when you drive out to these sites that we are exploiting for our benefit. I want to show you the process of getting to these remote locations and hopefully give you a better sense of just how minimal our impact is. So I'm driving up to Edmonton here. These are some landscape shots. Just took out the side of my window. Not really award-winning, but hopefully they give you a sense of the drive. I eventually get to the motel. This is the motel that I stay at overnight, and as you can tell, it's very, very high-end. Nothing but the best, because I work in oil and gas after all. The next morning I get up. It's minus 43 degrees Celsius. I drive to work and I pick up my truck. So my truck is provided by the company, and I left Edmonton around 8:45 or so, and I headed up northwest of Edmonton on Highway 43. And I drove for about 3.5 hours on this highway, not quite as good as the highway you saw in the previous pictures, and a little more remote. Fewer houses, fewer farms. There are some towns along the way, but not quite as big as the ones that I went through before. Stopped at McDonald's for lunch. This is in Whitecourt. They do have a Tim Hortons. Good for them. Here you can tell it's starting to get really remote. Here's a truck on the highway. I assume it's pulling some kind of oil and gas equipment there. Here's a good horizon shot. This starts to show you really just how wild it becomes up there. No more, a lot fewer farms anyway, and more of this type of landscape. This just goes on and on. And I drove on this for probably about 4 hours. A couple of trucks in front of me for oil industry stuff. Those signs on the right hand side there are oil and gas signs for companies that are directing people along this next highway. This next highway is a secondary highway, and I drove on this for 52 kilometers, not quite, but almost. This is what it looks like. It starts to thin out in terms of population, and it just becomes wild. It looks like that, minute after minute, kilometer after kilometer. I did find some cats here doing some work, and I think what they were doing was building a natural gas pipeline, so you're about to see that coming up. Whoa! Isn't that just crazy? Isn't that the worst thing you've ever seen in your life? A couple of yellow pipes amongst those trees? No, seriously, I gotta ask you, if you were a moose and you came across that, would you care? If you were an Aboriginal person and for some reason you're out in this forest in minus 43 degree temperatures, would you just weep for your culture because there's a yellow pipe there? I don't think so. And some people might say, well, at risk of spill, but I mean, you don't stop eating for fear of choking. As I continue down the road, I eventually run into this little gate, and this leads to another patch of road. This road you require a two-way radio to drive on. It is a logging type road, and it gets very, very wild, as you can tell from these pictures. Very narrow roads. I got stuck on the shoulder, and a guy had to pull me out with his semi-truck. 50 kilometers of this forest and wilderness, and it took me about an hour to drive through it to get to my drilling site. When I eventually got to the drilling site, they've cleared maybe a couple of football fields worth of trees in order to set up the equipment, and that's basically the environment that I live in for 3 weeks at a stretch while we drill for natural gas. And here's a shot of the derrick sticking up amongst the trees. And that's why you have heat in your house when it's minus 43 degrees outside. So I hope this gives you some sense of scale and perspective. I don't think that our footprint is really that much of an issue. Certainly nothing to panic about. And frankly, our lives are better because this is being done.